I'm just a tool maker from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Look, I'm going to speak today about the power and the pride and dignity of work. And if you walk away from what I say today, I hope that you walk away with this one thing, that power and pride and dignity exist across this land. Yes, on the assembly lines, in the auto repair shop, in the kitchens, all over, where working men and women feel good about what they do. And it is what has made America what it is. I ain't kidding either. Despite what you read in the paper, America's still a great country. It is a great country. It's the greatest in the world. And yes, we are challenged. We're challenged because, you know, there's competition. There's competition for jobs. There's competition for work. But, you know, I'm going to ask 3 questions and answer them in my speech. The first question is, who are we as Americans? These are questions that are important to our future. Who are we, really? Whatever happened to why is it that the middle class is shrinking? And whatever happened to the American dream? I think I can answer all of those. And it's rooted in the following idea. The world we know, where we live, the ways we move, the cities we raise, the energies we wield, the dreams we dare, and the hopes we hold are all shaped by work. And you all know this is true. And yet today, the future of our work in America is a question. I say it's not a question, but I say that we have to do things and meet these challenges. And the challenges are rooted in manufacturing, reigniting a manufacturing renaissance so America gets back to what made it great, that is being able to do things. And at the core of that is enabling the American workforce, teaching them the skills that are necessary. This is the seminal issue of our time, and all of us can have an effect on it. And you know that's true. You know, I come to this, before I go on, I just want to recognize Michelangelo. I'm going to say a lot about technical education. The upskilling of the American workforce is the seminal issue of our time, and we have 2 great leaders in that cause today. First, I'd like to recognize your president here at Lakeshore Technical College, one of the top 10 colleges, technical colleges in the country. A great honor. Michelangelo, I suggest you give him a round of applause because you are lucky. And then my friend and colleague, direct from Washington, D.C., in a successful speaking tour at the White House, the president of Gateway Community College, an equally strong partner and visionary in technical education, Mr. Brian Albrecht. You know, as I stand here, I can tell you that I come to this subject kind of easily because of where I'm from. I'm from Snap-on. We're tool makers at our core. We serve working men and women. And it's worth, I think, giving you a little thumbnail on the Snap-on company, because it shows you why we look at things the way we do. Founded in 1920, now more than 95 years ago. 1920, there were 7.5 million vehicles on the road. Today, for your reference, there's almost 300 million vehicles. So in those days, it was the beginning of the auto industry, but it was really the dawn of auto repair. Nobody knew what a technician, an auto repairman, what skills they need, what products they needed to use, what kind of tools they needed. Comes an engineer from right down here, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a guy named Joe Johnson. And he gets an idea. He says, I'll take 5 handles of different sizes, an ellipse, a T, a crank, and put them together with 10 sockets of different dimensions and fashions them so they snap on interchangeably. He said those 5 handles do the work of 50 tools, and they did. And they revolutionized tool sets all over this country. They made work easier for mechanics. And we like to believe that idea, that concept of innovation has echoed down all these more than 9 decades. Did something else. He built them out of the greatest steel of its day. We still have some of them, and I think if you picked up some of these and you transported yourself mentally back into 1920, you would say that these are kind of built like a brick structure. I might have said that differently when I was in Vietnam, you know. But look, you feel like that, and a tool today, a Snap-on tool today, I tell you, pick it up and you'll say, this is a good thing, this is really good. But here's what he did that was more important, more brilliant, more far-reaching, and more relevant for today. He told his salesman to go into the garage, into the shops, and lay those tools, those 5 handles and 10 sockets, out on green felt, as if they were as precious as surgeons' knives, implying that if the mechanic used these tools, he would be declaring to the world that he's doing something special, perhaps as special as a surgeon. And the idea that the use of Snap-on tools, that the display of the Snap-on brand is the outward sign of pride and dignity that people take in their work, echoes through today, and it is at the basis of all we do. It's kind of a cool thing. My company is all about pride and dignity of work. We wouldn't exist without it. And those ideas of innovation and quality and pride and dignity have kind of worked over the years. You know, this is 95 years later, and we have 11,500 employees. We do business in 130 countries. We have 28 factories around the world. We have 4,800 of those trucks. You see the franchisees. We have 65,000 different products. We're in 2,800 schools with our products, trying to create the technicians of the future. And the best thing about this is, those hand tools, those tools we sell off the vans, those vans you see riding around the country, 80% of what we sell off those vans we manufacture right here in America, and a hand tool is 50% labor. So never tell a Snap-on guy that you can't manufacture in the United States. 50% labor. Check sometime how much labor is in a telephone, and I think you'll find out it's less than 10%. So we've kind of rolled through that, and we've kind of prospered. The sales are 3.5 billion, and the market cap, depending on the day, is 9 or 10 billion. It's been a nice company, and we're encouraged by its progress. And one of the other cool things about it is that brand still becomes important. You know, we just had our 95th anniversary, and we sold 95th anniversary boxes. They're pretty expensive, thousands of dollars, and they're worth it. They're great stuff. But it says on the front, they are, by the way, ebony clear coat, candy apple red trim. I'll let you opine on the appeal on your color palette of that. But on the front, it says 95 Snap-on, and on every drawer etched the years 1920, 2015. We sold thousands of them. That meant that technicians around this country wanted those boxes to put, was in effect, a display of the Snap-on brand and their affiliation to the Snap-on brand in their workplace. It's not just there. When I go to the county fair in upstate New York every year, and Rensselaer County Fair. I've gone every year since I was 5. I take my son. He's a writer in Los Angeles. He's going to write short stories about his father dragging him through the chickens and the lambs, and I'm sure this is true. He's laughing up his sleeve about all this, but I do it every year, and we always go to the tractor pull. And in the tractor pull, I'm sitting there in the tractor pull, you know, stuff like this. You can always look around and see Snap-on hats and Snap-on jackets. These people aren't mechanics, they're farmers. But they want to ascribe to the Snap-on brand. And then I get letters. Let me share this one with you. From John Lewis. John Lewis of Ulysses, Pennsylvania. He says, I love your tools. I love Snap-on tools. My father taught me to repair mechanical things. He's passed away now, but I still repair lawnmowers, cars, skidoos, anything with an engine. I'm going to use your tools for the rest of my life. John Lewis. John Lewis is a guy who likes to repair engines. John Lewis is a Snap-on customer for life. And John Lewis is 10 years old. So we get letters from people who are that young. That's kind of a cool thing. So it's cool to be the Snap-on CEO. Have you heard of this? One of the things about, so that's how we come to this so easily. I can tell you there are some ups and downs. So I am the champion, I was named the champion of Skills USA. And one of the cool things about being the champion of Skills USA, I don't know if you know about this organization, but it has competitions in things like welding and carpentry and so on, local, state, and national. National competition, 16,000 people in Freedom Hall in Louisville. I got to speak to them for a half hour. This is kind of cool, huh? All you see in the crowd is like glow sticks and cell phone flashes. It's your 30 minutes of Mick Jagger moments, you know? You're standing there like Mick, and they're doing all this stuff. So I felt pretty good. I mean, it came out pretty well. So I'm walking away. I feel good. Next day we get up and I'm walking around the exhibition, walking around to the different competitions. And people are coming up to me. Sir, could I have my picture with you? And these days with cell phones, you get a lot of these, right? Pretty soon, a line has formed to take pictures with me. I want to get a picture of the line waiting to take pictures of me and send it to my third grade teacher and say, see, you were wrong about me, you know? But I didn't get the picture. So anyway, they're going through this line. I am feeling good. These kids have been so moved by my speech, by Mick Jagger's speech the night before, that they want to get their picture with me. And then 5 people deep, somebody came up with one of these selfie sticks, you know? Young lady, young man. Sir, can we have your picture? Thank you, sir. This made our day. Now, who are you again? They didn't know who I was. All they saw was this guy in a suit. So I guess they were getting pictures taken with anybody in a suit at this thing, hoping it was somebody worthwhile. So you rise up and you go down pretty quickly. Look, I travel around the world. I said we do business in 130 countries around the world. And I visit an awful lot of them. And recently I came back and I pick up the New York Times. You know, we could talk about the New York Times as a sort of snobbish paper. I do. It's one of the 4 or 5 papers I read every day. But it has some interesting articles. And this day it had this headline: "We're not number one. We're not number one. We're not number one." Like a cheer about America. Well, having traveled around the world to all these countries, I just got back from Shanghai. I've got Shanghai currency in my pocket. I can tell you without question, without equivocation, without qualification, that America is still the greatest country in the world. There is no question about this, and if you ask that question outside the United States, you will get one answer: America. Don't doubt it, despite what the New York Times says. If you don't believe that, let me give you a few statistics. We have double the paved highways of the next longest highway system. We have more, I think, greater range of opportunity, more comfort, and more availability of opportunity and things to do and education than any place else in the world. We have more airports. You know, China's a big competitor. China last year built 54 airports. 54 airports. 54 new airports in China. If they keep this up for 4 decades, they'll catch us. And we don't build any more. Huh? And if you don't believe that, in 2006, there were 5.6 million people lined up with green cards to try to come into America. 2012, before the Middle East crisis, before we had all this immigration question, there were 14.6 million, 3 times as many, 7 times more than the next greatest place. 50 million people must know something. They're not confused about who's number one. America is number one. And you could ask yourself, okay, if we are the number one country, why and who are we? This is my first question. Who are we? Do you ever think about yourself, why are we Americans? Well, we're not Americans because we have a common ancestry. We all come from a bunch of different places. That separates us right away from a lot of countries. We don't have a common religion, a particular religion. All forms of religion are found here. We're not even Americans because of a certain boundary, because the boundaries of the United States, the map of the United States has changed as often as we've added stars to the flag. We are Americans because we believe in certain things. We commonly believe, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness is the thing you want to focus on. It means being able to keep your family warm and safe and dry and have pride and dignity in what you do, and it has delivered America over the years. Historians have said this. David Landis, the Harvard professor, the late Harvard professor, who wrote this landmark book called Wealth and Poverty of Nations, talking about how different nations succeed or do not succeed, and talking about all the countries in the New World, North and South America. You can ask yourself these questions too. He says, why is it America has been ascendant among all these countries that started about the same time? And the reason is, according to him, because broadly our population could do things, could create things, could make things, could keep them running. This is widely recognized. Paul Kennedy, Yale professor, equal time, in The Engineers of Victory said that one of the reasons why we won World War II is, of course, because of the bravery and courage and sacrifice of the troops, but it was also because of the industrial substrate that was across this nation in places just like here in Wisconsin and Ohio and Illinois that created the military supplies our troops needed. If you doubt this, consider these statistics. In 1939 to 1942, 4 years inclusive, the factories of Germany and China combined produced 9,500 combat aircraft. 9,500 in 4 years. In the year 1942 alone, the American factories in the Midwest produced 27,000 combat aircraft. You see, that was as big a factor as anything else in helping us win that war. See, at the end of the day, we are Americans because we believe in the pursuit of happiness. We are the people of work more than anything else. It is what has made us succeed. And we've had, if you go back through American history, we've had brilliant leaders. People like Washington and Roosevelt, both the Roosevelts, and Lincoln, and Edison and Ford, in a lot of different ways. But the cool thing about America is we have succeeded not only on the brilliance of the few, but by the efforts of the many. Everyday people accomplishing together extraordinary things and making a difference. Valley Forge, 1777. The Continental Army retreats to that area, and they are withering in the winter, starving. Comes Christopher Lugkin, a simple baker from Philadelphia, who plies his trade at Valley Forge and gives the sustenance he became known as the baker of Valley Forge. He plies his trade. He gave those troops the sustenance to give the Continental Army the ability to go on and win the war that has created the republic that we have held so dear for all these centuries. Rose Will Monroe, a young woman from the hills of Kentucky. 1941, she decides to move north to Detroit and work in the Willow Run factory producing combat aircraft. She became known later, Rose Will Monroe, as Rosie the Riveter. A woman recently in California was the picture of Rosie the Riveter, but the name Rosie the Riveter came from Rose Will Monroe. And she and her sisters developed and nurtured the industrial substrate that allowed us to win the one war we could not afford to lose. Everyday people accomplishing extraordinary things. the people of work, America. If you think about Henry Ford was a brilliant guy, right? Henry Ford had an idea. Boy, assembly. And it was a brilliant idea, but he couldn't bring that idea to fruition without what I would call commercial amplifiers. And in those days, he chose the greatest commercial amplifier of this day, the American workforce. Energetic, dedicated, capable. And together, they created the American auto industry. Henry Ford got rich, and he should have for it, but along the way, he created ongoing lives of satisfaction and dignity and pride and prosperity for millions of Americans. And that story played out across this nation, right here in Kohler, down in Kenosha with Joe Johnson, from sea to shining sea, and it created the society that we love today. Now, make no mistake about it, though, we're challenged. Things aren't all copacetic. If you look at the headlines these days, you can see, one of my favorite headlines in the New York Times was "Pride and Sadness in the American Workplace." The Wall Street Journal said, "The invisible army, America's unemployed men." And the Washington Post, and my personal favorite, "The American middle class lost in space." And we see it written all over the headlines in terms of middle class, income inequality, all these kinds of things that create angst today about what's happening to our country. So that brings me to the second question. Why is it the middle class is shrinking? And my answer to that question is, you surprised? The middle class is shrinking? My comment is, no kidding, Sherlock. Because 30% of manufacturing jobs have disappeared in the last 20 years. And manufacturing is the way in which we've spread our capability out through the population. What we're becoming is a country that depends not on creation, but on transaction. Now, there's nothing wrong with transaction, but transaction is subject to bubbles and so on. By transaction, I mean I sell to you, and you on-sell and you on-sell. This creates economy. And in 1950, that represented 7% of our economy. Manufacturing represented like 25%. Well, today, manufacturing numbers have halved, and the transactional base have more than doubled. So it's a kind of a mismatch. Less people employed. If you're talking about the transactional part of our economy, it's 25% of the economy, it only employs 4% of the people. And it is subject to bubbles. Now, if you don't believe this, let me refer you to the year 1637. Anybody know what happened in 1637? Maybe somebody does. In 1637 in the Netherlands, before 1637, they discovered tulips. Tulips. I think they came out of the Middle East or something. And everybody got crazy about tulips. And so they started trading tulip bulbs. Transaction. They weren't growing them, they were grown in the Middle East. Well, one tulip bulb in 1637 would buy you a house in Amsterdam. A house! 1638, it might buy you a carrot. Boom, the bubble went down. They realized these tulips could be grown elsewhere. So it exploded. Now, if you think about that, if you think about the reliance on transaction, no wonder 2009. Huh? No wonder. There's nothing wrong with transaction. It's just more it's more bubble related, it's bubble vulnerable, and it doesn't use the great advantage that America has, that manufacturing uses. For every manufacturing job that's added, we add 4 more in other parts of the sector. For every dollar that's invested in manufacturing, we add $1.81 someplace else. So it is the great multiplier, and so it has always been. But what's wrong? Why isn't it working today? Wow. I think I know. Because, we had the brilliance of the few and the efforts of the many. Probably we don't have the ideas. There's not as many ideas. Well, actually, I think maybe there are. The F-35 jet engine, the iPhone, all these things. But here's a measure. How about Nobel Prizes? Nobel Prize. They award Nobel Prizes for smart thinkers, right? You know, the best thinkers get Nobel Prizes. Okay, so since they started Nobel Prizes in 1901, there have been 913 awarded. America has won 38% of them. The next highest country is 12%, that's the UK. So you might say, okay, we're dominant in that, but we built up a lead, you know, like Alabama or something. We built up a lead and we're cruising to the end. But actually, since 2001, 100 years after they were started, we haven't won 38%, we've won 41%. So we're actually winning more, we have more ideas. And of course, China may be skunking us in this, huh? China may be beating us. China has 12 Nobel Prizes. 12. Pretty good for an upstart country to start, 12. But more than half were won by Chinese people who were American citizens. Right. So it ain't the ideas. We've got ideas. It's the workforce. You know, workers are no good anymore, you know? You see, you go to workers, they're no good. You know, maybe the unions are no good, you know, or they've screwed us up, you know. Well, actually, if you walk our union plant in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or our non-union plant in Elkmont, Alabama, or our plant in City of Industry, California, or Algona, Iowa, or Murphy, North Carolina, you see the same dedication, and you see the dedication and commitment and capability and energy that I imagine Henry Ford saw in his workers all those years ago. The problem is this. Here's the problem. When you walk the factories in Shanghai and Minsk and Sao Paulo and Delhi, you see dedication and energy and commitment. So those all so American of virtues that used to be the monopoly of our workforce and in abundance are no longer differentiating. That's why we need to expand and arm our workforces in this competition. People talk about trade, you know, they're always worried about trade. Well, you can't not have trade. Now, that may be against a lot of your opinion, but China's a great example. China in the Ming Dynasty in 1600 controlled 45% of the world's GDP. That's twice as much as America has today. And when they closed the borders, their GDP went like this. So it's eminently demonstrated that you can't close your borders and not have trade. But what you can do, what you have to do, is arm your workforce to be competitive. And what makes me sad is when I hear this is what makes me sad. Really sad. Gee, you know, people in Mexico, they work awful hard. They work like slaves. The Chinese, we can't compete with them. You know, they're like cranking everything out. They're like robots. Since when are Americans afraid of competition? We are not afraid of competition. American workers are the best workers in the world, and if properly armed, they win. And in fact, the American worker I know says, you know those guys in those countries, to use a football analogy, we crush their linemen, sack their quarterback, and walk off the field with their fans. That's what we do. But what it requires is us to arm our people. You can't just open the trade routes and say, whoops, you know, we're going to let everybody in. You got to make sure, you got to recognize that we have to arm our people. That's what you need to do. And so, it seems simple, doesn't it? Let's upskill American workforce. That's the way forward in the future. And I agree with that. But the answer is, I think, first, technical education. First, the answer is manufacturing renaissance, and the fuel for that renaissance is technical education. Technical education. Now, we've been pretty good at four-year education. President Obama says we want to lead. I don't criticize President Obama at all. I just disagree with him in some cases. And so he tries to use the light he does. I try to use the light I do. And I can tell you, he keeps saying we want to lead the world in four-year degrees. How has that worked for us? Do you know, Liberty Street Economics came out. I think you like this piece of data. Liberty Street Economics came out with this is an arm of the New York Fed, came out with a set of data that said the average university graduate makes $1.5 million in their lifetime, more than the average high school graduate. Problem is, Warren Buffett's in that number. Take out the Warren Buffetts of the world, and it don't look so good, huh? In fact, if you look at the bottom 25% of all university graduates, they actually make less than the average high school graduate. And some years they make a little bit more. This is over a number of years. So those people, those kids, those young people are pounding out this cost to get education that doesn't matter. We are redirecting our people. We're directing our youth in the wrong direction. We need to direct them toward technical education. There's a couple of problems. The first problem is, well understood by Mike Lanzer and Brian Albrecht, is that you need, we were talking, it was mentioned just a little while ago from Volrad, is that we need to make sure that what's taught in the schools actually matches what's needed in the business places, in the workplaces of the world. I talked to one university president, and I asked him, I said, how you doing? He said, great. He says, you getting a lot of jobs? He says, yeah, getting jobs. We're getting a lot of jobs. I said, well, how many? He says, well, we really don't measure it. I said, well, you don't measure how many jobs your kids get? No. He said, well, isn't that your primary goal? Isn't it your primary goal of your 4 years? It's not an education, it's a career. He says, no, my primary goal is to take 18-year-olds and mature them into 22-year-olds at like $40,000 a year. And I'm thinking, this is actually what I said. I couldn't control myself. I was trying to bite my lip. But the thing is, I said, gee, I know an organization that will do that, will mature 18-year-olds into 22-year-olds and pay you. It's called the U.S. Army. I've had some experience with this, and I can assure you, you get mature. So a few tours in the KP, in the kitchen, you'll be mature. And so you have this. So I come back to it. We need, as business people, manufacturers and everyone here, to work with community college leaders to try to help them call in the airstrikes and train people to be exactly what we need. You have a great example of this right here in the Lakeshore country with Mike's LTC. You have a great example of this. He's one of the top. In fact, I think he lead from Snap-on has an organization called the National Coalition of Certification Centers. It's not our organization. We participate in it, and we try to set up certifications around the country so that young people can get certified in things that will be recognized by employers that say, yeah, I'm confident this person can do the job. They lead the country in that. And Lakeshore Tech, Jennifer Katz and Jennifer Bradley and Brian Katz wrote a book, Metro Revolution, and he talked about the U.S. is strength is in small areas where there's robust manufacturing and great education, and Lakeshore is one of those. I would just encourage you to keep doing that. Keep working with your schools, particularly technical schools, to make sure you keep drawing in the airstrikes. Now, when I say this, people say, well, if you're Snap-on, you're trying to get schools to do your work for you. You should train people yourself. And the truth is, we could. Big companies, GE, Ford, Snap-on, not so big, but we could train our own if we had to. But the substrate of America, the National Association of Manufacturers, has 14,000 members, and 90% of them are small manufacturers. It has always been that kind of base for manufacturing. Brilliant ideas launched up, matched up with local people, the efforts of the local people, that nurtures the economy and creates pride and dignity and satisfaction and prosperity in an area. But they need some help and training. I'm sure all of you know this, and so I encourage you to get together with the people in places like LTC and other community colleges. Now, it's more of a problem than you might think. We talked about, I think coming in here, we were talking about how many jobs were open in this area. Well, the National Association of Manufacturers say that 600,000 jobs in the country in manufacturing are unfilled simply because we don't have the technical capability. We don't have people who are trained. And that's going to go to 3 million in the next 10 years. This is a problem. It's one of the reasons why the middle class is shrinking. Because they aren't armed. We need to arm them and be able to do so. Now, there's a second problem. Problem number 2. And that is manufacturing and technical education, technical careers, have a heck of a PR problem. Maybe I shouldn't say this here, but I will anyway, is that when someone says, I want to go to be a welder, or a car mechanic, or a chef sometimes, or a nurse, sometimes even a nurse, people view them as having settled for the consolation prize of our society. If you doubt this, let me give you my experience. I just spoke to the Atlantic, this magazine in Washington had this forum, and I got to speak, and a lot of people with red-soled shoes, ladies' red-soled shoes, and these are like very expensive shoes, and kind of a very intelligent group. And I said to them, I said that to them, and you could see in the audience that they were very, very skeptical of what I said. They almost said, somebody almost raised their hand in the middle of my speech and wanted to challenge that assertion. And so I said to them, okay, I want you to think of this. What would you do if your son or daughter, niece or nephew, told you they wanted to be a car mechanic or a welder? And you could have heard a pin drop in that room because they knew what it was. Those are the things that, from their perspective, other people's kids do. Yet these are the very careers, they're the very careers that have created America. If you think about it. They're the very careers that have made it. And that brings me to my third question. Whatever happened to the American dream? Tyler Cowen wrote this book that became the darling of Washington in 2013. It said, average is over. And he basically said the American dream is no longer attainable. And I'm thinking he's smoking Colombian. But then I thought about it for a while, and here's the reason. Not that American dream, it's because we have redefined the American dream. We've redefined the American dream in a lot of people's eyes that said that unless you're a college president or a CEO or an attorney or a doctor or a TV correspondent, you are in the consolation section of our economy. We've redefined the American. Whatever happened to the American dream is we've changed it. But the American dream never said that. It never was that. The American dream was you keep your family warm and safe and dry, and you can take pride and dignity in your work. And I can assure you, having walked around the factories and the garages of America, that pride and dignity and prosperity and families who are warm and safe and dry exist in all those places. So one of the things we need to do is restart that idea. We need to transform those consolation prizes, that view of being a welder, into what a welder or a car mechanic or assembly line workers, into what they've always been, an American calling. They are the most of American callings because we are the people of work. And I have an analogy which I look around and I am sure no one in this room remembers, but I remember John F. Kennedy getting on the podium in 1961 and saying, "We are going to the moon." And then after that, millions of young Americans enlisted in an American calling called engineering or science or technology. That's what started it all. And if you went to a high school and you looked at kids were lining up for those kinds of things because they wanted to serve our country. And I suggest the president and our leaders can create that image again. All that needs to be done is they need to recognize and extol and celebrate, like they do at Skills USA, and I invite all of you to do the same, the pride and dignity of work, which we always knew and maybe we have a little bit forgotten. Then the final thing is we need to demand that our leaders, and I ask you to demand it of yourselves, that we recognize, we ask for true support, not just endorsement. Brian Albrecht, the Gateway president, just came from Washington, and I go to Washington all the time, and I can tell you this. I can go into any senator's office, to Wisconsin senators or any senators, and I can go into any representative's office and get them to say, I'm behind technical education. I want to expand manufacturing. Yet there's a big difference between endorsement and support. If you don't believe that, you ever hear of Dodd-Frank? Dodd-Frank's a law that they passed in Washington to curb the banks. I don't argue whether it was good or bad, but it was focused on curbing the banks. Yet there's a stipulation of Dodd-Frank which says manufacturers have to report what they call conflict minerals: tin, tantalum, gold, and tungsten, to determine whether they came from Central Africa. Well, whether they came from Central Africa or not is probably not going to change much. You don't have to stop using them. You just have to report it, and it costs American manufacturers in America an aggregate of $7 billion to do this. It's not so easy, especially if you replace any manufacturer that uses this kind of stuff. So what it says is, this is a law which is sold as a banking regulation, and they slip in something underneath it which tasks manufacturers. What it says is, the representatives in Washington, while they'll say American manufacturing is good, anything is good, they'll endorse it. When push comes to shove, they're willing to sacrifice the interest of manufacturing on the altar of the most obscure of tasks. You can look it up. And what I mean by that is, so there's a difference between endorsement and support. Every idea, I know this, because every idea that comes into my office, I can endorse. The whack-a-mole ideas all get eliminated before they come to me. So I could say every idea that comes to me is good. The problem is, I don't have the energy or capital or intent to support all of them. I have to prioritize. And so what we need to do is ask our leaders from the president on down to recognize that we are the people of work, that manufacturing is important, that technical education is the fuel that drives that, and act like it. Not just say it. Not just say it. Because we are the people of work, and I see no path to prosperity without continued expansion of manufacturing, becoming more a country that, what we always were, that creates as opposed to transacts. And the fuel to that is upskilling the American workforce and arming them in the competition that is today. So that's sort of my message. This is a great country. I am so proud to be an American. We all should recognize that. And we can be clear-eyed, and we can be proud, but we can also be unsatisfied and recognize that we are challenged. And those challenges are in the whole idea of where we came from. The most important thing that makes us Americans we are the people of work. And that work depends on the brilliance of the few and the efforts of the many. But in that competition for jobs, to become the commercial amplifiers, like Henry Ford used the greatest commercial amplifiers today for his idea. Somebody gets an idea today, if he's thinking about commercial amplifiers, we want to win that. We have the capability, we have the dedication and commitment and energy, we have a great workforce, we just need to arm them. We just need to arm them. You see, what I said was, as I started, the world we know, where we live, the ways we move, the cities we raise, the energies we wield, the dreams we dare, and the hopes we hold are shaped by work. And I can tell you that when we look forward, if you look at the papers and you can see this, when we look forward, you can see that people have questions about the future. People have questions about the ongoing American prosperity. People have questions about the American workforce and whether they can compete. Well, I say the American worker is not a question. The American worker actually is the answer. And it's up to us to work to upskill them and enable them. And that will drive a manufacturing renaissance which has always made America what it is. You see, without such a thing, vehicles don't roll, oil doesn't flow, economies don't grow, buildings don't rise, planes don't fly, and I dare say that freedom doesn't ring. And it's all due to the manufacturing and the fuel of technical education. Like the subject of this day, manufacturing does indeed rock. Now, I want to just finish by saying this. Look, I am, in the fullness of my time, I have become a student of careers. And I know there are many people in this audience who actually do make things for a living and have dedicated their lives to it. And there are people in this audience who are part and parcel of the upskilling of everyday Americans. And that is a career that is worthy. And so for choosing those careers, you have my congratulations. You are the people. You are the people who will really make the way forward for America. I'm not kidding either. In the way, right here in Lakeshore area. Lakeshore area is going well now, but let's keep it moving forward. And for the service that you provide for these people in this area, the people who put their economic future in your hands, and for America in general, you have my admiration. And for inviting me here and giving me a chance to give you my message and tell you the Snap-on story and talk about America and where we're going, you have my thanks. Have a great day, everybody.